everybody. Welcome to week 3 of this part of our series that we're working on. Today we've been talking about hope, and the thought and the ideas behind hope bring me to this verse, Philippians 1, verse 6. The Apostle Paul is writing there, and as he's writing, he says, "I'm confident of this very thing, that he," speaking of God, "who began a good work in you is going to be faithful to see it through to completion by the time that Christ returns." And I think that's something that each of us have this desire. We recognize that when we come to Christ, that there's a process that started, this process which begins with our salvation experience ultimately, and that redemption where God claims us and he says, "I'm going to do something in you, I'm going to work in your life," and he says, "You're mine," and then he starts to apply this idea of purpose and identity, and all of those things are associated with that. There's also the realization that it isn't always an instantaneous and immediate process, that there's this idea of progressive sanctification, if you will. It's this idea that we are being made more like Christ through each and every day as we go through the process of submitting ourselves to God's will and identifying with the scriptures and trying to bring ourselves more in line with the character and the person and the life of Jesus Christ. And as we do that, our lives are changed and they're transformed. And so as I look with this project and we're working together on this, I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about how there is this idea that, I had this vision in my mind, this idea of this piece of furniture that I wanted to create. However, it didn't just happen with that idea, and just because Greg brought this stuff to my house, it didn't automatically result in the sudden appearance of the finished product. It was simply the beginning stages of what would happen. And when we come to Christ, there's a lot of us that is still left. Even though we give our lives to Him and He comes into our hearts and we submit to His will, we ask Him to come in and make us new, and we're told that there's this spiritual rebirth that happens. There's still a lot of us that's left. There's still a lot of that fleshly nature that Paul talks about in Romans in the 7th chapter. This idea that there's still this thing inside of us that's wanting us to do things maybe that we don't really want to do, and then there's this part of us that's spiritually alive and it wants to engage in all of these spiritually powerful principles and practices and disciplines, and yet there's this struggle. And so as we go through the stages of our faith development, I believe that we become more and more like Christ, ultimately bringing us to that point of completion, to where we really are made in the image of Jesus Christ. And so today I'm going to show you briefly just some of the things that we've done leading up to this point. Okay, I've already made the face frame for our project, and it's actually going to be a little cabinet, sideboard, whatever you want to call it, but I made the face frame already. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be ripping down some pieces of 1/4-inch cherry in order to start putting the actual cabinet together. Okay, so once we have these pieces cut, the next step is to begin clamping it all together, getting it glued and clamped. We'll do a dry fit, then we'll do a wet fit, and we'll get this cabinet actually put together. It's kind of an exciting part of this process when you see some of these little pieces that you've been putting together. Suddenly it starts to take shape and it begins to look like, a little bit like, the final product.